Hi, this is John Reed of johnerp.com. I got my SAP Mentor jersey on tonight, and I got my hair a little wet in the rain, but hopefully it's behaving enough for this video that I'm going to shoot. I wanted to do a video on these new SAP roles that are emerging. I did one like a month ago, and it just wasn't very good. I had all these notes prepared, it just didn't go very well. So I'm trying again this evening to really nail this for you. Maybe I will, we'll see. But I want to talk about these new techno-functional BPX type roles that are emerging in SAP. Now, in the SAP Career Outlook white paper series I did for the SCN Career Center that you can also find on my site, johnerp.com, I talked about the ideal skills mix for an SAP professional. And I talked about how historically I've seen it as an 80-20 mix. But I also mentioned that in some of these new roles, more of a 50-50 techno-functional mix really does make sense. Now you can look at another video I have where I go into the 80-20 side. But as far as these 50-50 roles are concerned, I did a podcast with the Enterprise Geeks on this topic in mid-January, which you can find on their site, and I'll post a write-up on my site as well. But in this podcast, we talked a little bit about these emerging roles. Now, here's one of the problems is that the job titles for these roles are not yet solidified and also don't mean the same thing on every job order. So you have to really take some of this with a grain of salt. What I'm going to do is give you my definitions of how I'd like to see these roles solidify. Now, keep in mind that I don't view the BPX type of skill set as one formal role to aspire to. I view it as some flavors of skills that all SAP professionals should be looking to add to their skills profile. Some of these might have traditionally been known as soft skills, but it's everything from understanding lean and agile methodologies towards process modeling tools and functionality, towards looking at SAP from an end-to-end process perspective to change management. All these things fit into the BPX way of thinking about SAP. And you can see more detail on that in my papers. But let's hone in on these roles. Now, the most common job titles you're going to see are SAP Enterprise Architect and SAP Solution Manager. In most cases, these roles are mostly technical focused. Now, sometimes I've seen Solution Manager refer to more of a functional role. But at any rate, here's how I see the two terms being used pretty interchangeably, Enterprise Architect and Solution Manager. If you do a search on DICE for Solution Architect or Enterprise Architect, I may have just said Solution Manager because I'm going to do a podcast on that, but forget about Solution Manager. That's not the subject of this video. Do a search on Solution Architect or Enterprise Architect, and you'll see fairly similar job descriptions in some cases. I view them as a little bit different. I view the SAP Enterprise Architect as someone who is taking a much broader technical look at the enterprise landscape and how SAP interacts with other systems in that landscape, from everything from a security perspective to a process perspective to an analytics perspective, to a web-enabled SOA perspective, however you want to slice and dice it. I see the SAP Solution Architect as more focused on the SAP side of that. In other words, how do you craft SAP solutions that are process-based, that connect different kinds of SAP functionality, that connect different SAP systems. And to me, that is the really SAP-focused BPX role. And that's usually a technical role, and most people who have moved into that role really were technical leads in SAP or basis engineers that are senior who have moved into that solution architect role. In fact, Ed Herman of the Enterprise Geeks considers himself a solution architect, I believe, so you can get a feeling for that by listening to his podcasts and his stories about his work. But I do think there will eventually be a functional role, and this is something I've been debating a lot, and one guy who has a lot to say on this is Vijay Sankar, who's a fellow SAP mentor as well. And Vijay has questioned whether this role will really emerge on the functional side, and we don't know. I've run into a few. You might call them process architects or process experts. Now, are they really going to be traditional SAP functional consultants to make that transition? We're not 100% sure. The process architect is probably going to have a little more technical skills because they're going to be able to need to use these modeling tools and modeling environments that really aren't business user friendly yet. They probably will be at some point, but they're not yet. They're going to need to understand the principles of agile programming techniques and basically how to refine SAP end-to-end processes beyond just a silo functional module looking at a broader process. So instead of configuring pricing, you're looking at a whole order to cash scenario, for example. So I think some functional consultants might make that transition over time. But the bottom line is right now, that functional BPX role, that process expert role, if you do a search on DICE, you might find 1 or 2 jobs. It's just not heavily in existence yet. So as a professional, you have to be a little careful to time these trends properly. So on the technical side, we see a little more action, like maybe 20, 50, 100 of these roles out of 50,000 DICE jobs. But then on the functional side, we see a smaller amount. So that's something to pay attention to because that reflects actual company needs. At the same time, that doesn't mean that we should wait to learn more about some of the pieces in the skill set that could be helpful to us in our project. And again, that's really on a person-by-person basis. And I think there are good roles to aspire to as far as, I'd like to be the first person in my company to really be a solution architect. That could be a good career path because it's a way of having senior technical skills but also bringing in business knowledge, but then not necessarily becoming a manager if that's, you maybe you don't have to be like a senior manager to be in that role. You can keep your hands in the technology if that's what you want. So maybe these roles expand what's possible for SAP professionals to aspire to, and in that sense, they're very healthy. So anyway, we'll continue this discussion on the community network and on my own site in many different forms and contexts. So I wish you luck with your SAP BPX skills transitions. This is John Reed of JohnERP.com.